if you're in business and maybe you haven't filed your taxes in a while, or you filed them wrong, or you've been kind of skimping out on some payroll taxes, we're going to talk about the cost of that. We're going to talk about why it's the easiest loan you can get and the true cost of not paying that and how to get it fixed fast. We're going to talk about how common it is and how one HVAC company got into a huge $300,000 tax problem because of their bookkeeper. And this is more common than you'll expect. And we'll talk about how to fix it. We'll talk about what happens when the IRS actually contacts you and how they can call all of your customers and how to prevent that. And the one question that our guest today, Bill Fritton, the back tax expert, asks that determines if you should stay in business, get rid of those taxes and keep going, or close your doors. I know it's a scary proposition, but we're here to help on the Taxes Show. Let's get started. You want to know one way to save thousands of dollars, put just extra thousands of dollars in your pocket? It's super simple. Every week, we're going to send you a tip from the Taxes Show when you sign up for our newsletter. Go to taxes.show, or if you're on YouTube, just look below for a link to sign up for the newsletter. We're going to send you a tax tip every week. That's simple, easy to do, alternative investment advice, possible Q&As with tax experts. Plus, every month, we're going to give away a super cool I Hate Taxes t-shirt. Some version of that. But join us on the Taxless newsletter to make sure you don't miss a single Taxless episode. Bill, thanks for being on the show again.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And I'm excited to talk about back taxes.
You're one of the few.
Well, I mean, it's people, it's like this hidden thing that, I mean, it happens to a lot of people.
It happens to a lot of people, yeah.
And
I have an office full of them, yes.
Yeah, and everyone's so embarrassed about it.
Very embarrassed. It's a tough thing to talk about. It's admitting that maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you didn't make a mistake. Maybe just things happen. Life happens. Things go by the wayside. With businesses, sometimes the money just isn't there and you have to prioritize what you're trying to pay. And one of the easiest places to take a loan is from the government by not paying your payroll taxes. There's no application. There's no application fees. The way the IRS is presently working, they're probably not going to catch up to you for a while. If you don't file the taxes, they definitely won't catch up to you for a while.
But it's not a good idea.
It's not a good idea.
You're making it sound like, oh, I can get this loan.
No, it's an easy loan, but it's a very expensive loan.
How so?
Penalties can be upwards of close to 50%. So if you're, not paying $25,000 in payroll taxes, if you don't handle it timely, it could be upwards of $10,000, $15,000 in penalties. It used to be a relatively low interest rate loan when interest rates were much lower, but now you're paying 7-8%. So that's not cheap money anymore.
Yeah.
And the way it compounds, if you get too far behind, it sometimes can be impossible to work out of.
And it happens a lot, and because it's just so easy. It's so easy. There's the money. Yep. Hey, let me just use this money, and then I'll pay it back.
Yep.
Right. And tell me a story of someone that this happened to.
So it happens to a lot of people. I've handled big-ish problems and smallish problems. One of the larger ones we've handled is for an HVAC, doing several $1 million a year. And what typically happens, and what happened in this case, is you're doing your jobs, you're hiring the people to do the jobs, and you're getting contracts. And then all of a sudden, at least in his case, he's a commercial HVAC guy, a contract's slow to pay. But you got 60 workers who are counting on a paycheck to take home. You have to pay them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're not showing up to work. The job's not getting done. And then certainly you're never going to pay. And that's what happened to him. His contracts were slow to pay. They went from paying in 30 to 45 days to 90 to 100 days, to 120 days. And now all of a sudden, the cash flow is severely crimped. And how do I pay my payroll taxes? I can't pay that, pay materials, pay supplies, and pay my workers. And on top of that, pay the payroll taxes. So in his case, unfortunately, He had a bookkeeper. In his case, he didn't even know about it until he should have known about it. If you're the owner of the business, you need to be keeping an eye on this stuff so
Yeah.
that you know what's going on. But he was out in the field every day, managing the jobs, getting the contracts, bidding the jobs, managing his workers, complex situation, metal fabrication, etc. And he had a bookkeeper he trusted was paying the taxes. Probably shouldn't trust anybody when you're doing several $1 million a year to do that without keeping your own eyes on it.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, water under the bridge. He came to us after he discovered the first notice from the IRS. So they filed and he did not have a large payroll company handling everything for him. His bookkeeper was doing the payroll, supposed to be remitting the taxes weekly as she should have been, and it wasn't getting done. And when the notices were coming in, she was hiding the notices. And then eventually, when the notices started to come, she said, well, I shouldn't file the taxes if I can't pay them.
Oh my God.
So by the time he came to me, he said, I owe $100,000 in back payroll taxes. Can you help me? I said, sure, this is what we do. We contacted the IRS immediately.
So I want to back up like a little bit about that process. What, he calls you and says, I owe $100,000 in payroll taxes.
Mm-hmm.
What do how did that work? Like, were you like, tell me about that conversation. Like,
Sure.
Do you have to look at all the books and everything before?
So no, usually not the books. The first thing I did was ask him to send me the notices. So he sent me the notices and I took a look at them. And I said, okay, let's say it was for the first and second quarter of 2022. And I said, okay, this is first and second quarter of 2022. We're now in the middle of 2023. I said, are these the only notices you've received? He's like, yes, those are the only notices I've received. I was, have you filed and paid everything since then? I don't know.
Oh, wow.
All right. Well, we got to figure that out. So we get the power of attorney, which allows us to speak to the IRS on his behalf or the company's behalf.
And if I call a company, because there's so many of these companies doing this, can any company get a power of attorney? Can anyone get a power of attorney?
No, not anybody can get a power of attorney. You either have to be a CPA, an enrolled agent, or an attorney.
Okay.
In his case, technically, whoever signed the tax return could call. So if the bookkeeper had signing authority and was able to call the IRS, she would actually be able to do that. But in this case, no. So we got the power of attorney, submitted it to the IRS. We have a proprietary system. Once our power of attorney hits the IRS system, we can actually go into the IRS's database and pull all the information we need to see what's going on. When we did that, well, in his case, it was somewhat urgent because he had a final notice of intent to levy, and owing a substantial amount, he had, in a business of his size, he had, $100,000 in the bank. He had probably over $1 million worth of accounts receivable. So at that point, the IRS could either their first step is probably going to be to go to the bank and take that money, which really puts him in a bind because now he can't pay payroll, can't pay taxes, can't pay his suppliers. He basically shuts him down. Okay.
Can they go after personal money at that point?
Eventually, not at that point.
Okay.
Eventually they can, and we can go over that if you'd like at some point. But eventually, yes, they could come after the responsible parties. But at this point, it hadn't gotten that far.
And if it goes with payroll taxes, if it goes too far, can they go to jail?
Yes, it's unlikely. I wouldn't say it happens a lot, but if it goes too far, yes, it can. Yeah, and it really depends on intent.
Yeah.
If you're going to go on,
him not knowing, and
him not knowing, and other things happening. The likelihood from him was, you have to actively try to deceive the government.
But you shouldn't try and handle this on your own because it could look like you.
Especially if you don't know what's happened. I say in most businesses, most business owners don't have time to deal with this on their own. Not only do they not have the knowledge, but it takes an enormous amount of time, especially with a problem of this size, to deal with it. And if you try to deal with it yourself, you, as a business owner, a lot of times you're not looking at it objectively, okay?
Yeah.
You're looking at it from, and I hear this story time and time and time again, the ship's coming around the bend. Okay.
Mm.
I'm going to get XYZ contract in 2 months, and I'll just write a check and pay it all off. Okay, well, XYZ contract doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Or it does happen, but at a number you weren't expecting, but you also have costs associated with that job.
With XYZ. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you still have to pay materials, supplies, your workers, whatever. Most businesses don't have 50% margins where they can just write a check to make up $100,000 shortfall somewhere. It does happen, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a great point to make, because it's like, you know, as business owners, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you think, well, I can figure this out.
Yeah.
I can do this on my own. I've done everything else on my own, but I don't know of any software that I can go hop into the IRS and see what's going on.
Right.
But you have that.
Yeah. And you know, most entrepreneurs by nature are very positive people.
Yeah.
Okay. They like you said, they've done it all on their own. To that point, in most cases, they've been very successful. Okay. And they figure, I'll just make it up. I'll make more money and I'll pay it. It's a lot easier said than done a lot of times. So in his particular case, you know, we got online and I said, you know, I'll use a fake name, Joe, did you realize you haven't filed or paid any taxes since the second quarter of 2022? And this is a year later. No, I had no idea. I had a bookkeeper.
Yeah.
So, you know, now the IRS is calling. So we have to make an immediate call to the IRS to prevent anything bad from happening and try to buy the time needed to figure out exactly what's going on. And that's kind of the first step. You do the research, and then you make an immediate call, or we make an immediate call to the IRS to hopefully head off, you know, them garnishing your receivables, worst case scenario, because now you don't have any money coming in, and now all your customers know you have a tax problem.
Oh my God. Oh, because the IRS contacts.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They say you owe XYZ company, you know, $200,000. They owe us $200,000. Send the money to us instead of the company.
It sounds like the mafia.
It is, well, yeah, kind of is.
But
no,
legal.
no, yeah, but legal, very legal. So that leads, obviously, in most cases, that's going to put a company out of business. If you get, you know, your receivables garnished, it's going to put you out of business. So what we try to do is, or what we do is contact the IRS, buy the time needed, figure out exactly what's going on. And then in his case, we had to file all the tax returns up to date. And then obviously the number goes from whatever number it was, 100, to now well over close to $300,000. And now you're looking at a business that's maybe doing, you know, $400 or $4 million a year, owing $300,000. How are you going to pay that back? I mean, it's an HVAC company. They make decent margins if you price it right. Okay. But certainly nothing where you're going to be able to pay that off in a short amount of time. And that's where we start really digging in and looking at the business and looking at ways to resolve it.
And so what did you have to do to fix that?
So in his case, the first thing we did is looked at, okay, where is this, you know, money? Why did this happen? All right. And in his case, it happened because of slow pays. All right. And some of the contractors he was working with, you know, weren't paying, and he still had, or thought he had to continue to do the work if he thought he had ended it. And, you know, these people just keep stringing them along.
Yeah.
Until finally you're like, I got to get paid. All right. So in a couple cases, we had to go to court, get mechanics liens. And he eventually got paid, and he got, you know, and that prompted them to cut checks because these were big jobs. And with the mechanics lien on it, but he didn't know all that before he came to us. He was very successful at what he did. We also figured out that in some cases his bidding was not great. He was bidding to get the job as opposed to bidding to make money.
Yeah.
And we see that a lot, you know.
Interesting.
So, you know, that's great that you won the job, but if you're losing a nickel on every dollar you're bidding,
why do it?
Why do it?
Yeah.
So we helped him, you know, do that. The biggest thing for him was obviously getting rid of the bookkeeper, finding somebody who knew what they were doing and who was going to be more honest about it. In his case, we actually set him up with a payroll company. which took care of everything. But even with the payroll company, the money's got to be there in order for it to work. And fortunately, we were able to get him on a payment plan where he was able to pay it back over a reasonable amount of time without killing his cash flow and putting him out of business. So number one, we looked at his business, increased the profitability, and helped him increase the profitability, and then get him on a plan with the IRS where after a couple of years, he was able to pay it off. And we kept them away from assessing him personally, which at some point they did want to do, but we bought him the time on that as well. So that did.
That's amazing. And it's interesting thinking about this too, because, I've talked to a lot of tax experts, and you look at like these big tax companies that they would never go that far and like look at the person's business. They wouldn't know how to look.
They wouldn't know how. They don't. Most of the big tax companies deal mainly with individuals, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but I think mainly they deal with individuals. And those, I don't know for sure. I've never worked for one. Okay. But the amount of time needed to actually analyze somebody's business is pretty substantial.
Yeah.
You also have to know what you're looking for.
You know what you're doing. Like you're saying, the bidding, mechanics liens.
Exactly.
We got to go to court, the right attorney. Like, it's not just like wham, bam.
And if you've done it long enough, like I have for 30 years, you kind of know what to look for. You know the pressure points, with restaurants, is product walking out the back door? Is a case of Jim Beam going out the back door every, and you go, how can I not make money? Well, because your bartender's stealing from you.
All right. Yeah.
Now, these days, that's a little less likely because of all the, POS systems and everything else. But there's still mom and pop businesses where they don't have that type of thing, and it does still happen. So
if someone can't pay their payroll taxes, haven't paid their payroll taxes, what do you suggest to that?
The first thing you need to do is you need to get everything filed. Okay. That's the first thing you do. If nothing else, don't think, I can't pay it. Don't file it, because you will save yourself money if you just file it. You get rid of the failure to file and those types of penalties. And then what you need to do is figure out, do I have a viable business? Like, why am I not able to pay these taxes?
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Do I really have a viable business? Because if you have to take a loan from the government every week when you make payroll, something's wrong.
Oh, yeah.
So you're either not collecting your receivables, you're not billing your receivables,
or you're spending too much money.
You're spending too much. You're taking trips to the Caribbean, once a month. So you got to really analyze, can this business make it if I pay my taxes? And if the answer is no, then sometimes the hard decision is, some people aren't made to run a business.
Yeah.
Some people are better off working for somebody else.
Yep.
Okay. They may be very good at what they do, but they don't know how to run a business.
Or they just never were taught the books.
Exactly.
No, and I mean, I talk to so many business owners, like, you don't know any of this stuff? And they're like, no. And and you don't know your margins? Like, no. And I'm like, this is stuff you need to figure out.
How can you run a business without knowing your margins? Like, how do you, if you don't know where the money's going every month, how can you know if you're doing well, not so well?
Or what makes you money?
Change? Yeah. Or what do you have to change?
And that's where, folks, that's why I bring in experts like Bill. I mean, because someone can call you, right? And even if they don't owe back taxes, but they're like getting on the margin, they can give you a call, right?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Yeah, we can go to backtaxexpert.com. You can set up a call with Bill. Bill, this has been amazing. I mean, folks, it's like you said, it's common, right? It's
very common. You're not alone.
And it's not something to be afraid of. The only thing to be afraid of is just not doing.
That's the worst thing you can do. Doing nothing is the worst thing you can do, especially in a business, because if it gets far enough, they can come after you personally, and that is really, really hard to get out of.
All right, so give Bill a call. Go to backtaxexpert.com, sign up, and tell him you saw him here on the Taxless podcast, and he will give you a free consultation. All right, Phil, thank you so much for being on, and
thanks for having me.
Thank you all for joining us on the Taxless podcast. It's been Ian Garlic from Garlic Studio. If you're behind on your taxes, you're not alone, but it can be scary, and the wrong advice can really cost you. But the right advice can get that out of your hair, and you can move on. What you need to do is find a local certified tax expert, and you can find that at besttaxhelp.org. On this website, you'll be able to find local tax experts near you, compare them, see their rates, and figure out what the best next steps for you before you ever have to talk to anyone and never have to talk to the IRS again. besttaxhelp.org.